Okay, we got another one. I'm going to put two graphs in this video. I'm going to do it a little bit faster here. But what happens when now, what's going to happen when we get this negative here? Okay, so here's the one thing I'm going to do. I want you guys to figure this out. But the original one was just cosine of x. So instead of writing out the quadrant system, we knew that this was 1, this was 0, this was -1, this was 0, and this is 1. Now go back and see if you can graph the function when we have a negative in front of cosine. Okay, so I got the table listed, I got the points all plotted out, and then I'll just draw the graph through it. Notice what's happening here between these values. In the original one we had 1, but because of that negative, it changes the value of our trig function from positive to negative. And 0 won't change because anything times 0 is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trace this graph using kind of a smooth curve here. And notice the scale every 2 tick marks was 1 unit. Now, what I'm going to do is in blue, I am plotting what cosine is originally. And I'm actually going to plot this negative value. I'm going to put a dashed guy here, though, just so we kind of see. Okay, let me actually change that one to black. As the graph is extended through more than 360 degrees, notice that both the sine and the cosine functions really look similar. It's just one starts at, the cosine function is starting at 1, because that's what it is at 0 degrees, and then the sine function would start at 0 because that's what it's equal to at 0 degrees. And so this is how we can graph with a negative in front of it. So what happened is the graph flipped. So this is a reflection. Okay, let's go on. So let's talk about this. Let's see what happens when we have x plus 90 degrees. What's going to change? So this one, what I'd like for you to do is notice a few things, and I'm going to have you pause it and try and figure it out. I think this is one of the best ways to go through these graphs, so you can kind of understand how things are put together. Is this guy right here is I'm taking my angle, whatever it is, and adding 90 degrees to it, and then evaluating my trig function. So let's see what happens. So I'm going to pause. When you come back, there'll be some work on the board. Okay, so you can see all the work on the right-hand side of the screen, and what I'm doing is I have my inputs here on the left, and then so these are all, and we know 360 is the same as 0, so whatever the value was for 0, that's what I get for 360. So I took all these guys and just said, okay, it's 0, 90, 180, 270, and the equation's telling me to add 90 degrees to that. Okay, so I add the 90, and then what's my trig value? So what happens is I get 1, 0, -1, 0, and 1. So I'm just using the information I got right here. And so now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and plot my graph. So technically at 0 degrees, we're at 1. So I'm going to call this guy 1, call this guy -1. So at 0 degrees, I'm at 1. At 90 degrees, I was at 0. At -1, I'm at 180. 270, I was at 0. And 360, I'm at 1. So if I take the sine function and add 90 degrees to it, this really looks like the cosine function, and it is. So when I do this type of, when I add 90 degrees to a sine function, it becomes cosine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw this picture. Okay, I'm not going to label the points because we've done that in the previous 2 videos. And what I'd like to do is I'm actually going to put the original cosine function on the graph. And I'm going to extend the blue graph back to -90 degrees, right? We know that's the same as 270, so the blue graph is 0 at 270. So what I want you to look at is these are both the same shapes, but the only difference is if we look at the starting point right here, I'm going to change the thickness here. How many degrees are we changing here? 90. And we went backwards 90 degrees. So we shifted left 90 degrees. And notice how the equation is set up. When we had quadratics, we would take this guy, set it equal to 0, and subtract. And we'd get the x shift as a negative 90. Okay, so that's the shift of the sine function.